Hello, my name is Kathryn Nelson and my paper is Challenging Culture to a Greener, More Sustainable Future. Culture and the environment can be seen as counterbalancing each other in the sense that nature is supposedly the antithesis of culture. Therefore, this paper will firstly address current environmental changes caused by the activities of humans and then examine briefly how traditional Western culture has led to the objectification of nature. Yet culture was originally a noun of process, the tending of natural growth, and therefore closely allied to the natural environment. The current definition of culture often alludes to a process of human development, and this development has significantly impacted on our natural world, with reduction in biodiversity, global warming and overpopulation. I will argue that visual art can both negatively and positively impact on our understanding and appreciation of the environment. I will briefly discuss the capacity of the arts to transmit multiple meanings and in particular scientific environmental narratives. After all, the arts have an ability to convey and promote insight, similar in many ways to mythology, where traditional lore explains natural wonders. The arts play a part in interpreting and shaping our society, but they also emanate from and reflect that society. Given their significance, the arts can promote societal discourse, assist with public education, and even reshape society. Yet the environment has reached a biological tipping point. The reason that this concept is so important is that change from one environmental state to another can be devastating for ecosystems. An example is that savannas can quickly change from shrub land to desert by overuse by local people and the domestic animals. Yet by planting fast-growing trees and excluding herbivores, restoration of the savannas can occur. However, the tipping point is not only a concept that involves local ecosystems, but can be seen as major keystone species are lost. Such significant fluctuations and disturbances are mass extinction events. Although the environment crisis is so potentially damaging to our species, many Western cultures have also seen reduced human contact with nature. This in itself unfortunately demonstrates the loss of appreciation and understanding of the importance of the natural environment. A reconfiguration of the nature-culture divide is needed, with different disciplines attempting to understand the relationship linking our species to other creatures. This has led to the discourse between the natural sciences versus the arts, cultural studies, humanities and social science. We need a dynamic shift from our species objectifying and ruling nature towards caring for all living creatures, however small. This new relationship involves self-realization. We are not separate from nature, but part of nature. Our species must rapidly reconsider our relationship with the natural world before the global tipping point is reached. Culture intermediaries, the gatekeepers and tastemakers of culture, are influential in our cultural narrative and therefore can assist in societal discourse. They can therefore promote ecological awareness and even assist with understanding environmental mitigation responses. Culture intermediaries can use transdisciplinary concepts to engage society in environmental narratives. Nevertheless, this laudable idea will fail if the gatekeepers and tastemakers of culture remain neutral. They must assist the artists, writers and creators to develop new tools, redefine and reclassify the arts, in order to search for transdisciplinary approaches that can push the narrative of the environment crisis to new audiences and possibly once again reframe the term culture towards the tending of the natural environment. Artists through their art supply exact information about new realities and therefore they can increase freedom of expression through art. Art can be seen like a distant early warning system to show what is happening and what will happen. After all, art can play its part in mythology as an interpreter of truth and sacred realities and can be a vehicle for integrating technical knowledge into culture and policy in the new era of the Anthropocene. Culture and nature must become interconnected rather than divided, and therefore it is vital that the arts and the sciences work together. Given these ideas, I would now like to turn to the work of the artist Agnes Deans. Most public art in the USA and Europe has been commissioned through public bodies. The power of the art directors and managers working within these public funding organisations is considerable, since they commission monuments and markers that can be political. Public art, it has been argued, has a radical leftish political agenda, and in the 1980s was involved in the urban regeneration. Agnes Deans secured $10,000 in funding in 1982 from New York City Public Art Council, PAC, for an art commission. And the work she achieved could be described as an exemplar of publicly sponsored urban regeneration. Deans selected to work in the 92-acre Battery Park landfill set in Manhattan to create Wheatfield, a confrontation. Her work explored the rural landscape of food production and was set against New York's skyscrapers, powerfully exploring the natural versus cultural divide. She said the work was to draw attention to our misplaced priorities and deteriorating human values. From its urban location, it brought into focus the artist's concerns about capitalism, food security and consumerism. Yet these environmental concerns may never have been realised without the work of the city's financial support and the cultural intermediaries who approved the project. Dean's work can be considered as urban renewal or to some degree a restoration project, yet the ecological literature is full of restoration projects that have been completed throughout the world. And these are often on a larger and more complex scale than Wheatfield confrontation. The difference perhaps between the publicly funded artwork and the ecological specialists that restore and rewire the environment is difficult to gauge, yet public art is culturally visible and often set within an urban landscape. Cultural visibility is perhaps paramount when considering how to address human impact on biodiversity and promote a more sustainable lifestyle, since it can directly connect to the urban dweller. I would now like to turn to another artist whose work is perhaps in complete opposition to Dean's, the artist Damon Hurst. In 2012, Damian Hurst had a retrospective exhibition In and Out of Love at the Tate Modern, where over a 23-week period, 9,000 butterflies died. The owl butterfly, a tropical species, was used, and although they normally live for 9 months, in the artificial gallery space, they survived for a few days, or sometimes only a few hours. Pupa and live butterflies were obtained from the Philippines and Costa Rica and delivered daily to the gallery. This retrospective was the most successful exhibition by a single artist in Tate Modern's history, with a total number of 463,000 visitors recorded. The cultural intermediary, private gallerist J. Joplings helped to promote and support Hurst to find fame. Jopling has sold 400 of Hurst's dead butterfly artworks. These are purchased for a maximum of £300,000 each. Although Hurst may have used both dead and living butterflies in his work would never have gained such a wide audience without the work of cultural intermediaries like Jopling and cultural institutions like Tate Modern, who both endorse and affirm the use of nature for artistic purposes. The gatekeepers' and tastemakers' responsibility for exhibiting and therefore condoning such environmental art is questionable, yet in many ways perfectly describes their cultural power and impact. Art has a transformative power and has social impact, and it can have a positive influence or negative impact. Hurst Butterflies are an insight into contemporary culture and aesthetic values. Insects may have been beautiful to observe, but they also died in their gallery. Hurst is said to be a genius at commodifying his art, yet perhaps he is actually changing how we view nature. He has transformed butterflies into products which we consume. So why does Hurst's exploitation of nature matter? Butterflies, for instance, like other insects, are in decline, with 40% extinction rate expected in the next few decades. Butterflies are particularly affected, and although the main drivers are intensive agriculture and urbanization, our awareness and understanding of their importance is arguably culturally defined. If we see them purely as products for consumption, we misunderstand their vital importance. Their loss will be devastating, and there will be catastrophe repercussions. After all, insects play a vital role in many of the world's ecosystems. I would now like to move away from the carnage of Hurst's dead and dying butterflies to the work of Natalie Geminenko. Natalie Geminenko worked with the community of Pond, Yerba Buena Center for the Arts and Sanchez Art Center to develop the collaborative public art project One Tree. The project began in 1998 and it is still unfolding. It is an exploration of the nature and nurture debate. The artist wants to explore a tree's inherited qualities versus environmental growing conditions. The project began by taking juvenile tissue from a mature Los Angeles County walnut tree growing since 1907. Micropropagation techniques were used to grow 1,000 propagules in tissue culture. These grew into young trees that were exhibited in San Francisco in controlled environmental conditions. She worked with individuals and local groups to find suitable locations for the young saplings. Geminenko hoped the public would act as observers and would make independent decisions about either caring for the trees or abandoning the trees. The saplings were planted in pairs throughout the San Francisco Bay Area. Geminenko has stated, "I am committed to the idea of information politics, and through her project she believes that the trees have become conductors of information and will assist individuals to gain the ability to interpret environmental signs and, when necessary, take appropriate actions." Yet of the 13 planting sites in the Bay Area, there are only 9 sites with living trees. The death of the trees is significant since it calls into question our cultural mores, and if individuals and groups involved in the project understood their commitment to a living organism. In the wake of the environmental crisis, aesthetic experience of nature should be part of our ordinary life and contribute to our appreciation of the natural world. It is therefore vital that socially engaged art should attempt to contribute to societal change and to the emergence of a nature-culture unification paradigm. One Tree does show that such work must also take into account that some of our species may just abandon and desert nature rather than cultivate and care for her. After this brief examination of these works of art and how they were promoted and supported by cultural institutions, I would now like to draw together some conclusions. The environmental crisis should be alerting our species to the realization that our cultural attitudes and behaviours need to change. Attitudinal change can be assisted by the cultural intermediaries, since galleries and visual art projects can be places to reinterpret how society engages with the environment. The process of understanding the environment can be further developed by the use of visual art, since it can transmit multiple meanings. These multiple meanings allow for the engagement with ideas that are not directorial but interpret natural phenomena, which allows individuals to challenge their own value system in a flexible and egalitarian manner. This approach of social engagement rather than instruction is important, since there are historical warnings that must be considered if culture is to be used as a political instrument. political propaganda and social engineering may be the end result. Culture can impact on value formation and legitimise certain art over others, and therefore it can promote a greener, more sustainable future. After all, the need for change is urgent. The Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services recognises the central role culture plays in expressing connections between people and nature. And given this assertion, the work of cultural intermediaries and their institutions have become even more significant, since in many ways they make culture. The role is therefore problematic, but also highly significant, and their impact on the environment perhaps the most pressing concern given the global environmental crisis. Gatekeepers and tastemakers are integral to culture, and any significant change to how people relate and appreciate the natural environment is not only the work of the environmentalists, but also the role of the cultural intermediary. Scientists have shown that localized ecological systems shift abruptly and irreversibly from one state to another when they're forced across critical thresholds. They have warned that to avert a planetary scale critical transition requires global cooperation to reduce anthropomorphic forces. These tipping points are part of the new geological epoch of the Anthropocene. Nevertheless, it has been suggested that there is confusion between environmental artistic terms. They argue for a new category of art which takes its value not from the Western economic system, but contributes to local and global ecology. This concept of art's realignment may allow us to appreciate art's ability to create multiple meanings. We, as a species, must become fully aware that we are part of the environment and not separate from it. This requires substantial change, not only through the reduction of the world's population, reduced resource use and better management of biodiversity and ecosystem services, but also in how we appreciate and culturally value the natural world. This requires substantial change in how we as a species understand our impact on the environment. Social responsibility for this crisis has to be placed on all individuals. However, the tastemakers and gatekeepers perhaps should respond by accepting their role as social influencers and communicators. After all, tastemakers and gatekeepers can make it socially acceptable, in fact, an expectation that we all seek a greener, more sustainable future. Thank you for listening.